energy. And there's so much more we can learn, like these ancient texts. And people say, well, why do you always focus on the ancient past? Well, because the past is prologue. If we don't understand what happened back then, we're doomed to continue to repeat these cycles of time that we've been in for quite some time, for eons.
Billy Carson, in addition to his focus on ancient civilizations, is deeply interested in the potential of the human consciousness and its connection to the universe.
I don't believe we're even from Earth, to be quite honest with you. Our cycadic rhythm doesn't even match Earth's rotation on its axis. We're slightly off. It's actually better tuned to Mars' orbit on its rotation on its own axis.
This includes the study of metaphysics, quantum mechanics, and the potential for human evolution beyond current limitations.
Like I always say, there is no Democrat or Republican. It doesn't exist. The only thing that exists is a group of elite oligarchs that torture men, women, and children worldwide. That exists. They capitalize and monetize us, and they put their boot on our neck. But to think that there's left wing and a right wing, I think it's the same bird.
Carson has gained popularity among people who are interested in alternative history and esoteric studies because of his commitment to unearthing buried truths. An overview: Billy Carson is a prominent voice in the investigation of the mysteries held by humanity. His research encompasses the mysteries of human consciousness, cutting-edge technologies, and ancient civilizations, questioning conventional wisdom and encouraging people to pursue greater truths.
So we're talking about texts that have been deciphered for a few hundred years, nothing that was just deciphered recently. A conventional explanation is always going to the term mythology. They throw mythology around, left and right to cover up the fact that they have no clue or idea. So they turn it into mythology so they can kind of say it's all fantasy and fairy tales, and this is how they expressed themselves or how they understood the universe. It's all mythology, it's all fake, but in reality, it's not all fake. These people left behind such detailed records and information. It's a time capsule of information on stone tablets for us today to be able to decipher, break down, and understand, and that's what we're here to do now. George Smith, he actually worked at the I believe it was Cambridge.
What was his take? Like, when he's reading all these wacky stories and all the Anunnaki stuff, what's his take on it?
He is literally subscribing to this information the way almost that you and I see it today. These people saw something, experienced something, interacted with something, and he cataloged it, and it inspired him to write a complete translation of the Enuma Elish and the 7 tablets of creation. And he talks about the fact that that information was copied right from those tablets and put into the Old Testament of the Bible. And so, not exactly like it's going to go from here to the Bible, but it went to other ancient papyruses and scriptures and so forth. And then later on, when it was discovered in caves, people took those and then said, okay, we got to put this into a book. And then it became the Bible much later, around 100 AD. But he subscribed to the theory that these people interacted with beings in some way, shape, or form, and that also this information is so incredible that it became part of the biblical text. According to the book of Enoch, which is one of the apocryphal books left out of the Bible, but he's important because he's mentioned in the Bible.
Enoch,
the book of Enoch. These beings came from heaven to earth, and then they have names. They taught human beings technology, how to make weapons, how to even make beer and all this other crazy stuff. And then they took Enoch on a trip to the Earth's atmosphere and beyond, and he saw the Earth and the shape of the planet as a sphere, and how he saw that he was living on a giant ball, and then brought him back. Yeah, this is all in the book of Enoch. The only Bible that has the book of Enoch in it is the Ethiopian Bible. It's the only Bible in the world that actually incorporated the book of Enoch into their canonized text. The rest of the Bibles omitted the book of Enoch. And the wars of these gods can be found in the book of Deuteronomy. The wars of the gods, these are the Atlantean wars that everybody's trying to figure out what happened. It's in the book of Deuteronomy in the Bible. All the wars are right there. But the reason why is because you have God, which is actually gods, plural, going to war against other gods in other towns and cities and other regions of the planet, and sending human beings to these places to go to battle, and sending angels with them with battle gear on to fight and kill. And the words are, go there, get in, kill the women, kill the children, kill the animals if need be, and if you see any women that you like, you can rape them. These are the exact words used. I want you to get a Bible and look it up. And if you decide you rape him, if you decide you want to keep him as wife, you can take him, but bring the spoils of war back to me. This was these internal battles going on from one region of the world to another region of the world, stealing and fighting over humans and resources. These people had become so evil, fighting against each other and utilizing human beings as chattel. And that's all in the book of Enoch. So God is good and loving and he's all the same all the time. But all of a sudden you read the book of Enoch and you go, what's going on? You know, the book of Deuteronomy, you read the book of Deuteronomy, you go, what's going on here? These aren't exactly the stories that, described. I don't think it's talking about the creator of the universe in that book. They show up everywhere in the Dead Sea Scrolls, in the Enuma Elish, and the Epic of Enoch. No matter where you go in any culture, you're going to discover that these beings, in some way, shape, or form, engaged mankind, brought knowledge, teaching, building techniques, and just so much more wisdom and information, esoteric wisdom, alchemy. All these things came from these people. When I started Googling and trying to find if anybody was looking at these anomalies, I came across information about the Anunnaki. That's the name of the beings that, according to the ancient texts, came from heaven to earth. In the Egyptian culture, they call them the Natiru. And they said they came to earth and turned mud into a kingdom. In the Bible, they call them the Anak. They have these names in all different cultures. They all show up around the same time in every culture. And I started finding more instances of them in every culture I looked into around the same time period. And I go, these people really came here at some point in the distant past. It seems to be now around 450,000 years ago they arrived. And about 200,000 years ago, according to the text, not me, they started genetically tinkering with human beings, saying they were adding their essence to them to get us to do the labor for them. So around 200,000 years ago, they started tinkering with us. And there's a famous cylinder scroll and with some text at the British Museum with Isis, the goddess Isis, who was one of the original Sumerian pantheon, not Egyptian, Sumerian. And she's holding up a baby and she says, the first Adamu, which means first man, my hands have created it. And she claims to have taken this baby to term for 10 months in her own womb to create the more modern version of Homo sapiens sapien.
Have you talked to Terrence Howard? Do you know his theory about how planets are created? That it's just things ejecting from the sun over billions and billions of years, and that there's a Goldilocks zone where you can create life.
Right.
And that's where the people are.
Yeah.
And then as this Goldilocks zone gets, you have to be super technologically proficient in order to control your environment to the extent that you no longer require the sun in order to keep you alive. That kind of makes sense if Nibiru's out there past Pluto.
Oh, it makes a lot of sense.
It makes sense
that Terrence Howard, because I just talked to him a couple hours ago.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I mean, so we were talking about wave conjugations and everything.
But his theory about the creation of planets, I was like, oh, that makes sense.
Oh, it makes a lot of sense.
We watch stuff fly off the sun all the time, and if this matter over time would coalesce and become a planet.
Yeah, it creates an accretion disk, and everything in space creates accretion disks. So once you have a certain amount of mass in space, it instantaneously, on its own, wants to create this circular, like the shape of our Milky Way galaxy, it wants to start circling and swerving around itself. And then as it does that, it begins to create friction. As that friction increases, the matter begins to collapse in towards each other, all right, based on its own energy, and then it forms a ball. And that then builds and attracts more mass until it builds into a moon or a planet or whatever. The 6,000-year-old theme, the Earth is only 6,000 years old. The reason why people think the Earth is 6,000 years old is because most of the tablets are 6,000 years old, and the Bible was written from the information that came from tablets. So that's as far back as anybody's quote-unquote knowledge seems to extend. That's where the 6,000-year-old theory comes from, but they've taken that thing and turned it into a religion. I remember one guy, he was going off and telling me he was going to shoot me in the head and all this stuff. And I said, let me ask you a question. If there's no atmosphere, then what are you breathing right now? He goes, what do you mean? Well, I'm breathing oxygen. I said, well, that's a gas. Gas doesn't exist. I said, well, then you should be dead then, because you're breathing a gas. I said, what else are you inhaling when you breathe? He goes, oxygen. I said, well, no, you're breathing in, helium, krypton,
mostly nitrogen.
Nitrogen. I said, you're breathing in all these other gases. Oxygen is only around 21% of that. Otherwise, you'd be dead. So he couldn't tell. I said, did you graduate from high school? He said, no. I said, I stopped talking. So that's when I realized, don't waste your energy on these people. The Anunnaki, well, the term itself means those who came from heaven to earth. And these Anunnaki are beings that came from outside of earth to earth, from many different places, potentially. Just like if you were to travel to Mars, right, and you met a Martian, they say, where you from? You say, I'm an Earthling. You wouldn't say I'm from Tampa. So it's the same thing. It's a generalized term. And so, but these Anunnaki, these are the original Atlantean people. They created an Atlantean civilization. How do I know this? The tablets, the Emerald Tablets of Thoth, which is my first book, is about the Emerald Tablets. It's a bestseller right now. It's #1 out of 3 million books on Amazon. Why? Because it's talking about the gentleman that ruled over the land of Chem before it was called Egypt for 14,000 years. He left behind these tablets that he authored himself. He didn't have a scribe write them. Back in the day, it was typical. If you were considered a god, you would have a scribe write your work. He wrote them himself. He talks about the Great Flood. He talks about civilization declining and having to be brought back to a higher level. He talks about all this stuff in the Emerald Tablets. And he covers everything from A to B. He talks about having technology in the Emerald Tablets. He has a ship that doesn't sail in the ocean. It flies into the sky until the earth disappears, until he gets to the place appointed, and then it descends from the sky back down to the land. This is 36,000-year-old text. And what's interesting about this text, where Jesus is talking in the Bible, quoted as being saying things in the New Testament of the Bible, I have side by side the verses from the Bible and the verses from both the Atlantean. Guess what? They're the same. Looking into this gold thing myself, and here's what I came up with. So when you start analyzing the text, you discover that there was an encampment in a place called South Africa at Adam's Calendar. Okay. Now at Adam's Calendar, there's actually the very first gold mines discovered. They're dating them back to about 200,000 years ago. And that's incredible because there's a building there that looks like a worn down structure. Now in the tablets, it talks about the fact that the Ijiji, who were the working class Anunnaki beings who were cleaning out the Euphrates and Tigris River so they can create irrigation and create a bustling civilization. Also, they were doing the actual construction themselves. No people needed, just them working. They were like the construction workers, and Anu and Enki and Enlil, these leader gods, were like the foremen, the master architects and so forth, right? The boss. So these people were working, but they weren't supposed to be enslaved. They were volunteers. They got tired of doing the work, according to them, for about 250,000 years of labor on Earth, and also, according to them, on Mars. This is in the text. They call it Lamu. And so they decided to go to war against Enki, Enlil, and Anu because their demands had not been met. So they went to meet. I know if you're an advanced civilization, you need gold. And the people that you have working it for you probably think, it's to adorn or to adorn yourself or in recognition of the gods. So they'll wear it and they'll utilize it, but not for technology. But what's crazy is they go to war, they get ready to go to battle. And then Enki says, I have an idea that will stop this war. There's an existing being on this planet, existing, not something that doesn't exist, existing. We can add our essence to it with a slain god. So they're talking about taking the DNA or genetics from one of themselves and mixing it with the DNA of the hominid that was here. It's not specified whether it was, an ape man or anything, but they don't specify in the tablets, but to create a worker being. And they began to do this genetic modification, probably disconnecting some of our DNA, making genetic modifications to us to get us to take orders from them. They inserted something called a worship gene, which was just discovered recently, that human beings have a gene inside of them that can be turned on and turned off. It can be turned off in a laboratory setting. It can also be turned off with a magnetic field around your head. And when it's off, you don't want to worship anything outside of yourself. You look inside, and when it's on, you look to get something from the outside. So this is incredible. They had talked briefly in that text about fashioning people. In other words, almost like... How did
they say it?
They said the word fashioning. Fashioning a being.
What was do you remember the actual quote?
I would have to look it up, the actual quote.
But they describe it as fashioning.
Fashioning, because they said even the lamb hadn't been fashioned yet, so they had fashioned lambs. So they fashioned, and it's also in the Epic of Gilgamesh, they fashioned the friend that Gilgamesh went on the journey with. He wasn't born from a woman's womb. They created him. They created him an artificial being to go on this journey in the Epic of Gilgamesh. So they use that phrase several times in the tablets. But they said, no, wait. It was almost like that's not a good idea because in some ways it seems as if they had known that the idea of making these too many artificially created people wouldn't be a good idea. Now they didn't go deeper than that, but you can see where we are today with AI and everything else and these robots that are coming. Maybe they knew something about that, but they decided to take a biological being and genetically modify and program that to do the work, and that's exactly what they did because they made a statement in the text. They said, the creator of all is going to punish them, or they would have to answer to the creator of all for what they did here. So, and that lets you know they weren't really gods. They knew themselves that they weren't the creator of the universe, but that they masqueraded as gods on this planet.
Do you think that if the Anunnaki are real, and if Nibiru really exists, and there's another planet with highly intelligent beings that are far more advanced than us, if that's the case, do you think there's more advanced and more, just like we are to chimpanzees, they are to us, and then another race is to them, and then it just keeps going on and on forever until you're God?
Absolutely. I believe there's levels to the game, just like there's levels in terms of how we live on this planet.
Yeah.
You know, we have a first world, second world, third world, just here on Earth. Now magnify that as a fractal, as a universe as a whole. You have civilizations that are 1 million, 2 million, maybe even 1 billion years ahead. And every universe every civilization progressing within the universe at a specific rate. So you can have beings that have already maybe even shed their corporeal bodies and only exist as beings of energetic light. And then you have everything all the way back down towards us. In the Emerald Tablets of Thoth, he actually says that he has achieved the ability to incarnate at will on and in the plane he desires. He claims to be able to incarnate whenever he wants, and even into other dimensions, which is wild. The Great Pyramid itself is a multifunctional stone computer and some type of spiritual machine combined together. You know, I took 70 people in October into the Great Pyramid at Giza, and we went and sat down inside the King's Chamber, and we chanted for about an hour. Om chant, which is the primordial sound of the universe. Om, right? That's the sound of creation. And it was so powerful and so moving. We all came out of it completely different. There's something about the resonant frequency and the ratio, the 2-to-1 ratio of the resonant inside that King's Chamber. It does something to your consciousness. It changes something in you. It takes you to a higher realm of understanding and belief. It's just an incredible thing. And just being around it, number one, there's over 2 million blocks, right, of the Great Pyramid. Just standing right next to the Great Pyramid, time slows down. You're in a time warp. You're in a time bubble when you stand next to the Great Pyramid. It's time dilation. So anybody standing 100 yards, a mile away, they're experiencing time microns of a second different than you are. Time is beginning to slow down for you. Just that one effect in itself, and then add to the fact that you have, you know, thousands of tons of crystallized, magnetized granite on the base and inside the King's Chamber. All that's affecting, those magnetic fields are affecting your body and your DNA as well. And him and I have very similar theories on how the power generation occurred. And I believe that the Nile, you know, when it used to run up close to the pyramids, and the water would run underneath the pyramid, and that would create something called physiostatic electricity as it ran underneath that magnetized crystal granite. Those ions would pour up into the chamber, move up the grand gallery where there used to be resonating rods, but you can see the slots where the rods used to be. They're removed now, but the slots are still there. Then it would be pushed into the King's Chamber where it would be amplified and some type of fusion would take place, then forced up through the apex, and then the crystal granite obelisks around the region would capture that ambient wireless electricity. And then if you had something called a JED, which looks like a Tesla coil, you can capture that energy and you can transfer it into a device for gold electroplating, for any other electrical tools you need, like some of the tools they had to have used to create some of these incredible works of art. We can see the tool marks, so we know they had the tools. But they had wireless electricity way back then. If you look at the tablets again, they talk about this war, right? And this war that occurred, there's a lot of wars obviously, but this one particular war, it seems like the same one that damaged the area or the region of the Giza Plateau, also Mohenjo-Daro in the Indus Valley up there by Pakistan. And the reason why it's interesting is if you look at the war in the text and then go to those areas, it looks now almost, you can begin to see, oh, wait a minute, it looks like war. Mohenjo-Daro, Indus Valley, the buildings turned to glass. The sand turned to glass, and the bodies are still laying in the street right now today, holding hands, never been scavenged by animals. And evidence of these wars can be found in the book of Deuteronomy in the modern day Bible. These gods, and I do mean gods with an S, because everywhere in the Bible where it says God singular, it's actually a mistranslation. The actual, if you backwards look up the translation in Arabic and then down to Aramaic and everything else, you find out it's gods plural. They were fighting each other over resources and people and control of the planet. And so that's why in the book of Deuteronomy, God tells people, go to this city, and it's like a far city where they don't even know that these people exist. They go over there to kill them. He says, kill the women, kill the children, and bring the spoils of war back to me. And you see these wars in the Mahabharata, the Bhagavad Gita, the Bible, the Sumerian tablets. And these wars are just nonstop, the Indian Vedas. And it's always about attacking another city, and even talk about Trojan horse methods to get behind the gates and then to, utilize that to attack and kill and bring back these spoils, which is pretty crazy stuff. It's like they were attacking each other. They had gone awry. They had gone rogue out here on this planet, and then began to fight over people and populations and resources. Geneticists and scientists discovered that our perfect wake and sleep cycle is more attuned to Mars' rotation on its axis, which is about 23 and something minute hours, and versus Earth being 24 hours. And so they said, wow, this is incredible. And the more they tested it and the more they studied it, they realized we're more tuned to the Mars than we are to Earth, which is pretty strange. If you want to say, oh, human beings could be aliens, well, actually, every person on this planet is an alien. Even our planet itself is an alien. Scientists just discovered something interesting. I've never talked about this yet on the podcast, and you guys can look this up. So our Milky Way galaxy is pretty interesting because it's absorbing another galaxy at this exact moment called the Sagittarius Dwarf Galaxy. Not the Sagittarius constellation. That's something totally different. We are absorbing the Sagittarius Dwarf Galaxy at this exact moment. People thought for all these decades, or even hundreds of years, looking up in the night sky, seeing that swath of stars going across, oh, that's the Milky Way. Guess what? We've been wrong the whole time. This is now being taught in universities in astrophysics. So what you're looking at the absorption or the merging of the Sagittarius with the Milky Way galaxy. And the exact point where it merges and drops into the Milky Way is right where our solar system is located, which would explain the rogue planets that we know that are out there. There's millions of rogue planets that have no sun, that are just floating free around. There's planets and solar systems that are orbiting far beyond the orbit of Pluto in our inner Oort cloud, admitted by astronomers now, that there's other solar systems within this inner Oort cloud area orbiting our sun every 4,200 years. So all of a sudden, that's Corey Powell, the astronomer at Discovery magazine, by the way, who said that. So this is pretty interesting. We're talking about the fact that our solar system itself is an implant into the Milky Way, that we come from Sagittarius. We're not even part of the Milky Way galaxy. Because they discovered that in some way, millions of years ago, something moved through our solar system and captured its own weird orbit around our sun. And what's crazy is the evidence is in our solar system. So Saturn and Neptune switched locations because of a gravitational field. Uranus has flipped on its side and orbits its equator is orbiting north and south, not east and west. And they know that
it got hit.
Like it got hit, or something gravitationally just tugged at it so hard that it flipped sideways. And this thing captured its own orbit. This is in the Enuma Elish, the 7 Tablets of Creation. This exact process that's been described now by astrophysicists and astronomers is in ancient text that we can read and we can see, oh my God, this is exactly what this text is saying. It's talking about the creation of our solar system. It even talks about the creation of Earth in that text. So it says that when Marduk, aka Nibiru, a moon of Nibiru, crashed into Tiamat, it broke into pieces and became the hammered bracelet. That's the asteroid belt. One giant chunk swung away, recoalesced with everything, water, land, and organic material needed for life, and became the Earth, tugging with it the moon. So it's pretty crazy that the creation of this planet itself, and it says that it pushed, the net force pushed Mercury closer to the sun and pushed Venus closer to the sun, and then we took the third spot in place around our orbit around our sun. And then, of course, we have Mars, which used to be a moon, a habitable moon of Tiamat, a planet that was 4 to 6 times larger than Earth, and it slung into this crazy orbit. That's why Mars has this weird orbit, and you have to rendezvous with it if you're NASA or anybody trying to rendezvous with Mars every 2 years when it's in apogee or perigee. You have to, with apogee or perigee, one of them is further away than the other. One is 80 million miles and the other one's closer. So if you rendezvous every 2 years, you can capture the orbit of Mars and you can actually get there in 4 months. And then they looked at it and said, wow, they meaning astrophysicists, this looks like this Mars wasn't originally in this type of orbit. It must have been orbiting something else in our solar system, which it was. One side is charred black and the other side is smooth. So the side where Tiamat exploded, those chunks hit Mars on one side, created a very charged side, and the other side is the smoothest surface in the solar system, which is because of the global flood that created. And then Mars's axis on its equator is tilted 45 degrees on its axis, which means the mass shifted it down 45 degrees. They had a major global catastrophe there on Mars. And then after Mars, you have another little planet that survived called Ceres, Ceres, which is also a result of this Tiamat exploding. People don't even talk about Ceres. It has the most fresh water of any other planet in our solar system. One is philosophical. When I went to Cambodia, not this time, but the time before, I was fortunate enough to talk to some monks, and the monk was talking to me and showing me these young monks that he had, like they were kids. I didn't even know they started as kids. And they were cleaning and sweeping, and I was like, man, the floor's already clean. The garbage is already, you got them cleaning it again? I was just joking with me. He says, no, we have to do everything to perfection. Even if it's taking out the trash or sweeping the floor, it must be done to perfection. Has some advanced race advanced to the point of philosophical concepts that everything must be perfected. If you think about living your life doing everything to a level of perfection, how much more improved we would all be if that was our main focus, perfecting everything. Now, not becoming OCD, but actually working and focusing on whatever task we're doing it at our best and highest level, right? And so that could be one thing. The other thing is that the technology, whether it's some type of a nano tool or whatever they had, it made it so easy for them. So it could be a combination of that because of their drive for perfection philosophically, that they've created a technology that creates this level of perfection so that they now eliminate one process of overthinking. We have the tech that can make it just like it's supposed to be. And the third is the function. So all these things, the function is energy. These things are transmitting a specific type of energy, radioactive energy, but also some type of other exotic energy, I believe, is combined. And there's one other thing to this. They're all mostly crystal. 40 to 60% is crystal. Now, crystals are sentient living beings in my personal research. They can replicate, they can communicate, they can send and receive information. They're alive. They can grow on their own. They can duplicate. So I believe that another thing that they did was they used stone that had crystal because in their perception, they were creating living machines. Okay, so the statues, they were alive. These vases, they're alive. Those boxes, they're all alive because they're loaded with so many tons of crystal. That's exactly what happened in the Emerald Tablets. 36,000 years ago, though, he arrives in this place called the land of Kem, ancient Kemet, before it was known as Egypt. His father sent them on a mission to rebuild civilization back up to a high level, meaning that it already was at a high level prior to this flood situation. And he says he gets into the great ship of the master and he takes off into the sky until the earth disappears. And then he goes to the plane appointed and he sees beneath him the children of the land of Kem. And he descends down. He doesn't sail in, he descends down. And when the ship lands, he opens his doors and he comes out with his crew. And he says the barbarians came at him to attack him with cudgels and spears. He says, I raised my staff and sent out a ray of vibrations, stopping him still as fragments of stone of the mountain. So he had a stun gun. He had a weapon that was, not lethal, non-lethal weapon that can freeze you in your tracks. And we have something just like that now in the military called the active denial system. They can send a beam at a crowd coming to attack and make them stop still right in their tracks. They can make you feel like you're on fire, make you feel like you want to vomit. They can even put voices in your head. They can make you be in extreme pain. It's called the active denial system. So he's talking about technology back then that we have right now. Human beings are like babies right now as a civilization trying to learn how to walk. And right now we're barely crawling. And then we plop down on our stomach and everybody screams and cries. But we're getting to the point eventually where we'll go to the edge of a table and pull ourselves up. And then we'll take a couple of steps and then we'll fall again. Everybody will think it's all over. Oh my God, we were doing so good, and it collapsed again. But no, that's just a fall. The baby will pull itself back up. It'll cry less and it'll take more steps until it falls again, until it can get this controlled fall. And that's the definition of walking, controlling your fall. So we're in that process now. Like you said, this is a proving ground for us to be able to develop consciously, spiritually, ascend to higher levels. And eventually, I'm pretty optimistic for mankind that we will get through this period. This is why we need to understand exactly what happened and how do we overcome what's been embedded into our epigenetic memories, because we're suffering from epigenetic mental hysteria, which is psychosis, and this war psychosis. We've been programmed as human beings to have consumption and fighting and competition over collaboration. Everything is designed to keep us separate. Divide and conquer is the main mission, and it works so well for so many thousands of years. And this divide and conquer tactic that's been burnt into our DNA and our code has put us in a situation where we are not advancing as we should be. We're getting now this technology leaked out to us. And yes, that's advancing pretty fast, but consciously and spiritually, it's holding us back. Earth is, partly is a giant mental facility. Mental health is a major issue on this planet.
Yeah.
When a person can look at someone and say they deserve to die because of their beliefs or their non-belief, that's a major problem. That's a sign of mental illness. So if you read the Emerald Tablets of Thoth, my first book, Compendium of the Emerald Tablets, I break it all the way down.
Okay.
He had these boxes in these underground halls that were discovered underneath the Great Pyramid, exactly where he says they were in his tablets. And in these halls, and it was just one of the locations. They had them all over the earth. They would actually create their own bodies. They said we fashioned our own bodies. So they would either take a stem cell and turn it into a clone of themselves, but they didn't take other bodies. They said they made their own. And then they would put a body in a rejuvenation chamber, which is the box. And then they would transfer their consciousness from the body that's been used up into the newer body. And they said that we would walk amongst men, but unlike a man. And so they would be here walking around, and you wouldn't even know that they just been transferring their mind from body to body. And each one of those boxes had bodies in them, and the body would sit there for 100 years, and they would walk amongst men in the body for 100. And Thoth says he did it 100 times 10. So if you take 100 times 10 plus the 100 years of each body sitting in the box, you're talking 100,000 years potentially. So you're talking about beings that achieve the level of immortality, not because of their gods, but because of they had advanced technology that allowed them to transfer their consciousness into another body. It says that human beings, or man, we call man, Adapa was created to be even higher than us, and that all the secrets of the universe, the mysteries, are within our body. And I believe that because when I started studying DNA, that took me into a whole DNA study. I discovered this scientist called George Church. And he created this ebook that he was able to take from a digital format, and he was able to download it onto 1 gram of DNA, a digital book. He converted it from zeros and ones into ACs, T's, and G's, read, write, put it on the DNA. Then he said, wow, this is incredible. DNA can store information in a volume. Then he said, okay, this is what we're going to do. Let's replicate this book. So he replicated the book 80 billion times on 1 gram of DNA. And this is not just a regular ebook. This book had graphics and images and everything else in it. So then he said, let's see if we can get it back. So he converted, created a read write again. He converted it from ACs, T's, and G's back to zeros and ones and uploaded it back to the server. So now he knows that DNA can upload and download information. Yeah, the human body can store 13.5 billion years or roughly of data, which is roughly around the time they believe the universe probably exists. So that myth of Adapa text could be accurate. The secrets of the universe is probably encoded into our body because we're just recycled atoms. If you look at the tablets again, this is why I love these tablets, man. They talk about the fact that, they had created this being, not created from scratch, but genetically modified. They add their essence to it, is what they say, added our essence. So by adding the essence, you can see where all of a sudden maybe our ancestors were in tune with the magnetic field and were able to communicate psychopathically, maybe even had telekinesis and these other innate abilities, weren't technologically advanced, but maybe more spiritually advanced. And they tinkered with us and took away our memory, took away our ability to tap into that so we can focus solely on them. And what I like about John Anthony West, his theory aligns with the Emerald Tablets date range, because when he talks about the Great Sphinx being built 2 processional periods back, it takes it back to around 38,000 years ago, around the same time that Thoth claims to have written the Emerald Tablets. And in these tablets, he talks about building the Great Pyramid. He said, "Builded I the Great Pyramid, patterned after Earth's force, so that it too might remain through the ages." So he claims to be the master architect of the structure of the Great Pyramid. And what he did was he incorporated into it advanced science. It's not just a power generator. It's also, in my opinion, it also could be a multifunctional stone computer. Okay? And this thing calculates the orbits of the planets in the inner solar system. So one thing, the equatorial circumference of the Earth can be calculated by the Great Pyramid, because the Great Pyramid itself is 1 by 43,200 scaled down. So if you take the Great Pyramid and scale it up 43,200 times, it fits directly inside the sphere of the Earth, and it touches the equator. And if you multiply that by the base perimeter, you get 24,734.94 miles, which is roughly within 170 miles of the circumference of the planet Earth itself. Okay, which is wild. You can also calculate the speed of the Earth around the sun. So the Great Pyramid Basically, you take a pyramid inch times 10 to the 8th power. It equals the speed of Earth around the sun. It's just mind-blowing because it's telling me what I've been talking about is accurate. Because why would a space agency want access to information about an ancient site if it didn't have to do with space and astrophysics? So when you look at the Great Pyramid and its astrological alignments, right, with Sirius and with Aldebaran and Orion and all this stuff, it's like, what is this? The Pleiades, what's going on here? And now, I remember, I think it was 2014, when I was getting ready to go up into the Great Pyramid, my guy was talking to one of the pyramid priests and one of the security guards, and they were saying, in the next 10 years, nobody might be able to come in here anymore. And she was like, why? What's going on? And it was because they said that NASA now owns the rights to the entrance into the Great Pyramid to get to the King's Chamber. Yeah. And so she said, well, why would they close it? And his excuse was, well, what they told him to say, or maybe what they said, and he believes it, is that the pyramid's unstable. There's some astrological, scientific stuff that's going on there that they want to be able to research and scientifically study, and they don't want anybody else to discover it first. That's what it's about. When I took a helicopter into the Grand Canyon about 2016, I think it was. I took a helicopter into the Grand Canyon. Mm-hmm. We went right down in a place where this rumored to be this ancient Egyptian area, where behind this opening to this cliff face. Yeah. And I'm like, they said, you can't go over there. Huh. I'm like, why can't I? It's sacred ground and we don't allow anybody to go over there. And so I'm like, okay, so they have lunchtime now. So as everybody's eating lunch and everything else, I'm sneaking away from the picnic table. I'm sneaking away. I finally find myself in this area where I can get away. And within not even 15, 20 seconds, this guy pops up. He's got on this all black. It looks like a military outfit, but with no insignias. Yeah. And he's got the AR. And he's telling me, you got to go back. You can't come over here. And I'm like, well, what's going on? Like, why can't I don't know. Why can't I come over? NASA owns the rights to this. You look at the way the pyramid is designed, the Queen's Chamber is technology. It seems to be like an electrolysis generating machine to extract hydrogen from water. And Chris Dunn had pretty close to the same hypothesis I had with that. Now, why hydrogen? It's the most abundant element in the universe. And right now, today, we try to communicate with ET on the hydrogen frequency. Now, those shafts, imagine on the certain alignments, we know for a fact that that pyramid aligns with specific planets or stars. Orion, Aldebaran, Draco, these alignments. And then these shafts would send out this hydrogen frequency, potentially on my hypothesis, around those alignments. Why? For communication purposes, updates on this breakaway civilization. Because I believe there was an ancient galactic war, which I talk about in my show, my docuseries Anunnaki. And this ancient war created these space refugees, which then spread out around the Milky Way. Earth just happens to be one of the breakaway civilizations. They discovered that chromosome number 2 was taken out. They call it an artificial mutation. They mean geneticists. Fused together and 2 telomere caps put on, 1 telomere cap on each side. Who in the world took chromosome number 2 out, fused it together, and put telomere caps on it? And they say that it happened as an estimated 200,000 years ago, right at the time that Sumerian tablets say they decided to make mankind to do the labor. There's no coincidence that the tablets are aligning with modern science. And this means that a couple things. The first thing, it means that we were genetically modified. The second thing that it means is the telomere caps limit our lifespan to about 120 years max, according to Harvard scientists. Now, in the Bible, what does it say? It says that my seed shall not abide in man forever. His years shall be 120. That was taken from the Sumerian tablets, even further back than that. Thousands of years before the Bible was written, when Yahweh, a.k.a. Enlil, shows back up, sees the human beings building a tower into the heavens, copying a tower that they themselves had built, it pissed him off. And he said, whatever their hearts decide to do, they shall achieve it. My seed shall not abide in man. His years shall be 120. And then he did a genetic modification at that point, I believe, with the telomeres. And he spread mankind out around the planet, and he confused their languages. He had us speaking different languages, so we couldn't collaborate. Now we're in competition, no collaboration. Divide and conquer. Planets won't be habitable forever. Even Earth. Let's say Earth never moved and stayed right where it's at in the Goldilocks zone. We're going to lose our control over the weather because the moon is moving away at a few centimeters every single year. And as the moon backs off of Earth, our weather patterns are going to get more hectic and chaotic, and the wobble is going to be uncontrollable to the point where life won't be able to exist. Not our kind of life won't be able to exist on this planet. So just losing the moon alone in a few million years is going to destroy us. So we have to create breakaway civilizations. We have to get out of here, which is what all these other advanced civilizations in these ancient texts have done. We believe the government is in control of us when we're in control of the government.
Right.
We allow them to tell us what to do when we should be telling them what to do and what we want. But we sit back and allow them to put rules in place, laws on us, and even lock us up and do things to us. And there's nothing we can do about it, but people think there's nothing we can do. There is something we can do. We've given up our power. We've relinquished our power to an outside source. Because of divide and conquer, it allows it to work. Once we realize that divide and conquer is just a distraction that we should coordinate together and organize, then we can take back control of this planet.